Hey there, YouTube's Chris Holman here. School shooting down in Santa Fe, Texas, just a little bit south of Houston. This one actually affects my family. They're all right. They're all right, but live about. I have family that live about 10 minutes away from the shooting, and one of them knew the shooter. Went to the neighboring high school. Hey there, Baker Mom. So, from what I'm to gather, the shooter is a 17-year-old. His name's Demetrius. Last name kind of hard to pronounce, but it's Eastern Orthodox. It's a Greek sounding name. Starts with a P, like Paga Loritz or something like that. Anyway, his first name's Demetrios. He went in there with a shotgun, a handgun, and I guess some explosives. He was engaged by law enforcement, and there was 10 killed and 10 injured. Could have been a lot more. Could have been a lot more. What I was told when I talked to family was that this happened. Now, I mean, a lot of this is still coming in, but from what I understand, it happened in an art class. Is what I'm to understand. One of the officers that responded was injured. The firearms were legally purchased by the shooter's father, and I want to say that it's important if you're a firearm owner and you have children that you keep your firearms locked up. Well, you need to make sure that they learn to respect firearms and firearm safety and all that, but firearms need to be locked up, right? Even if it's not your kid, maybe one of their friends comes over and they weren't raised right and they get a hold of them firearms, right? If you're a firearms owner, you got kids in the house, you keep them locked up. That's what you do. Hey there, Mass Faith. Thanks for coming. As I was saying, this one hit close to home. I have family live like 10 miles away, and one of them knew the shooter. I knew them. This kid played football, was on the dance team. No warning signs on this kid. All previous, there's all kinds of warning signs. Nothing even really on social media like this. There's no warning signs to this. The shooter was apprehended. He turned himself in. I don't know exactly. I think they approached him, and that's when he turned himself in. I watched the press conference with the governor, lieutenant governor, and Senator Cruz, and from that, I gathered that he had planned. They had said that he had planned to commit suicide, but he couldn't go through with it. So then he turned himself in. There are two other people of interest that they're looking into, so there may have been more than one shooter. I don't know what kind of shotgun he had, but with 10 killed and 10 injured, that's 20 rounds. But this is just your standard shotgun. He'd have had to have reloaded multiple times, which makes me think he may not have been the only shooter. And they're already saying there's two other people of interest. Don't let her speak. I wasn't even surprised when I heard about the shooting. I'm actually not surprised. I mean, I'll tell you the first thing that came to my mind, kind of, I guess, the conspiracy theory, I guess. I don't know. But, I mean, Wednesday there was an attempted school shooting in Illinois, and that was stopped with no casualties. The shooter was injured. That was it. So conspiracy theory was, well, maybe the deep state failed that time, so they're going to try again. But I don't know. I mean, I think something's going on in that shooter's life. I don't know, whatever. And but there was really no history, no warning signs behind this kid. It's not like what happened in Parkland where they were like, oh yeah, like nobody was surprised. Like everybody knew there was something wrong with that guy. And it was a complete failure of the entire bureaucracy behind that. With this, there was nothing. There was no warning sign, nothing to expect this kid was going to do what he did. I'll keep you posted with what I find out. In the coming, maybe later today, or maybe a false flag, take away guns, maybe. I don't know. I know that my family's really shook up right now. My dad and his girlfriend are going to be heading down to Houston area on Monday. Like I said, this affects my family. I mean, my family's all right, but I mean, they knew, and I mean, as far as I know, they don't know if any of their friends were the victims. So if that happens, I mean, I'm gonna pray for them. It's gonna be a tough time, a few days ahead, for sure. So I'm going to take this opportunity to just kind of have a discussion about these mass shootings and these school shootings. And back after the Parkland shooting, I had talked about this. And actually, one of the things I mentioned, Texas's lieutenant governor mentioned as well, was the controlled points of entry, right? I mean, these schools, I mean, how many entrances do they have in those schools? And this student just walked right in with a trench coat and a shotgun, right? You can't, no, you're not going to ban guns. Guns aren't the problem. The heart and minds of people is the problem. Controlled entry at the schools, 1, 2, 3 entry points at most. All of them controlled. To be able to get that and get everybody in safely, you would probably have to have, one group of students comes in at one time, and then maybe once that group goes through, and then the next group is scheduled to come through, and so you have a staggered school day for students so that you can get everybody in and out safely, but also be able to have a control point of entry into the schools. You need to have, I would say, a minimum of 2 officers at each entry point at those scheduled times, as well as a roving officer in the parking lot. They can stop something like that potentially before they even get into the school. But that's just the immediate fix. We need to fix the hearts and minds. What's going on, how kids are raised. We need to be actually addressing bullying in school. I don't think that was the case for this shooter, but in almost every school shooting, the shooter has been someone who was bullied at some point, either at that moment and had been for some time, or up until just recently. Like these kids have been bullied in school. Parents should raise their kids to stick up for themselves and to stick up for those that can't stick up for themselves, who can't defend themselves from bullies. Bullies are despicable people that cause harm. I mean, the harm that bullies do is not just physical harm. There's a psychological harm they do to these kids. And I think a lot of these kids that have been bullied that have mental health issues, a lot of those mental health issues are because they were bullied. Maybe not all, but part of it. Just think about it. If you raise your kid to stick up for themselves and to stick up for others when they're bullied, if they stick up for or stand up to these bullies and put a stop to it, maybe one of the kids that are being bullied doesn't end up being a school shooter, and it saves lives. See what I'm saying? And the schools and school staff, they need to be proactive in dealing with this kind of stuff, with bullying, right? Teachers, principals, the school staffs need to learn and be taught how to recognize warning signs in mental illness, whether it be depression or anxiety, or just kind of pay attention to what's going on and how kids are behaving, and how they're treating each other, how they're. There's so many different warning signs too. I mean, kids that are not. I'm not necessarily saying that all kids like this, but kids that are really quiet and withdrawn, there's something going on, right? And it may be because there's something going on at home. It may not be anything at school. They could be dealing with something, and that can cause all kinds of issues. And so teachers need to pay attention to that. When I was in school, and I'm sure it's still the same way, and probably everybody else has had the same experience, is that teachers have their favorite little cliques of students, and they cater to those cliques of students in their class, and the other kids, not so much. So teachers need to be held accountable as well, to make sure that these teachers are treating all children equally, and that they're focusing on making sure that they have a proper level of education, and that they're getting an equal amount of attention, and encouraged to learn, and to learn not just what they're being taught, but also social skills. And bad behavior needs to be punished, right? High school kids, man, teenagers, the way they treat each other, I'm telling you, they're psychotic. And, maybe when they're 19, 20, 21, maybe they're not psychotic anymore. But the way high school kids treat each other, man, only psychos do that. And so, I'm sorry. I was a teenager once, and it wasn't really all that long ago. 20 years, a little over 20 years. It comes down to good parenting and responsible parenting. Even if this kid, there was no warning signs, but if his father had just locked up his firearms, he wouldn't have had access to them. If his father and his mother would have paid attention to what was going on in his life, if anyone was to see a warning sign, it would be his parents, right? What is he going through? What's he dealing with? Was there a bad breakup? It could have been maybe at his school he was recently, ostracized for something. You can become a social pariah in high school like that. You can be all of a sudden cool, and then something happened and your social standing just drops to zero. And people who were your friends are now making fun of you everywhere you go, and you can't get away from it. That could be it. I don't know. I have an opportunity to actually find out some information, and I'm going to try to share it with you if I can, in the coming days. So the problem is in the hearts and minds of people. It's in how parents are raising their kids. It's in how schools are structured. It's in fatherless homes. There's so many contributing factors, and the gun is not the problem. The gun's not the problem. If it hadn't been a gun, it would have been something else. He had access. There was in his home and in this trailer, and potentially also in his car, and I guess on his person were homemade explosives, like Molotov cocktails and things like that. So even if it hadn't been a shotgun, right, it would have been Molotov cocktails. It'd have been something. If someone has an intention to kill, they're going to use something. So now I'm proud of Governor Abbott down there, in that he's making it perfectly clear right now. They're looking into ways to address this and to put a stop to it without infringing upon the rights of of Texans. And, you know, God bless Texas. Let me tell you, I love Texas. So, you know, they're gonna look into ways and what they can do. This particular school, Santa Fe High School there in Santa Fe, Texas, was one of several schools that received an award for safety. I guess they like 1,000 schools went through some safety evaluations, and this was one of those schools. I don't know. I mean, I think back to when I was in high school, and I don't know if high school is I would imagine it's worse now than when I was in. I don't know. I mean, heck, when I went to school, high school girls weren't hooking up like they do now, right? I mean, when I was in school, the schools I went to, if a girl in school got pregnant, it was it was a big deal. Now, uh, right? We didn't have a hookup culture when I was in high school, and that was mid 1990s. You know, it was different. I had a pretty decent time in high school when I went, but you know there was also a lot of kids that didn't, and I know that for a lot of kids, high school is hell. I mean, the way they're treated by other kids, the way they're treated by teachers, the way they're ignored by the high school staff when they complain about things that is happening around them and to them. Um, if the bully is a popular kid, the schools tend to side with the popular kid, the rich kid, the jock. They get away with that kind of behavior. Alec Hemi says video games have a lot to answer for. You know, I would say, I mean, I'm not going to go and say that video games cause people to become violent, but there is definitely a level of desensitization to that. I don't have kids, but I'm going to tell you, if I did, they would very rarely play a video game. Very rarely. And it'd probably be at a friend's house. It wouldn't be at my house. But that's just me. I think kids need to focus more on things outside and being active and having chores and responsibilities at the house, not plopping down for 8 hours from the time they get home from school and the time they go to bed watching TV and playing video games and eating Cheetos. You know, that's not how kids should be allowed to behave. You have responsibilities. You learn responsibilities. You know, if you're in high school, you get a job. Man, my first job in high school was as soon as I turned 15. I got a job at this mom and pop burger place washing dishes, and I worked all the way through high school. Um, as soon as I got out of high school, I got a job at this place where we built uh, radio towers and cell phone towers and things like that. Guide towers, self-supporters, things like that, 20-foot sections. I started out cutting the solid round and then the tack welding and stuff like that. I mean, I learned how to work at a very young age. I learned very quickly that if I wanted something, I had to work to get it. And that's something that kids today, I think I saw a report, something like only 30% or 35% of high school kids have jobs. Are you kidding me? And so, I mean, kids aren't learning responsibility. So, I mean, there's so many contributing factors to why things like this happen. Why you have kids that end up going to school and shooting their fellow students. There's a dysfunction there, and it's not the gun. It may be their access to a parent's firearm in the home, or we've seen where it's been, they're 18 or 19 or 20 or whatever, and there's all the warning signs there, and maybe they were even, like in the Parkland case, there in all rights, everything was already in place. He should have been stopped from ever even purchasing a firearm, but he wasn't. but he wasn't. We need to fix society, not our gun laws. That's what we need to do. Fix society, not our gun laws. I'll be in touch within the next few days. I'm going to try to get as much information as I can. So Mass Faith 3 says, so many people want to blame the children or even teenagers. It was a long post. Hold on, let me bring it back up. And yet they're only a reflection of what we train them to be. You're right. You're right. I mean, you know, if it's the bullying in high school, the parents are allowing that to persist. They're not doing anything. Whether the parents and the high school staff, I mean, children are going to behave and push the boundaries. And if there aren't appropriate boundaries, they're just going to keep pushing until they reach a boundary. And there has to be boundaries for kids. If parents don't raise their kids right, they're not going to act right. If teachers don't set boundaries and discipline the kids in their class, yeah. I mean, now, Mass Faith, you can't take all the blame away from the kids, of course, right? The kids themselves. You know, personal responsibility here. I mean, he's a kid. He was 17 years old, but he made the choice to do this, right? Nobody made him do this. There were other options he could have took. There's other avenues, whatever he was going through, he could have dealt with. So, yeah, definitely. I mean, there is blame to be held to the kids, but there's definitely his parents, his teachers, his family, all the people around him, the adults around him, definitely carry a considerable amount of blame. Definitely. All right. Well, I guess I'm going to hop off here, folks. And in the next couple days, I'll see what I can find. I'll read this last message here. This looks like a good one. Just started watching, but school has always been hard for me. It is about the detachment of our culture from responsibility of their own emotions and actions. Absolutely. Absolutely. You're right. So, all right. I will be going live here in the next probably day or two with some updates, any information I can find out about this. I'll definitely be able to find out some more information next week while my dad is down there in Houston. Everybody have a great weekend. Pray for Santa Fe, Texas. Pray for those students. Pray for my family. Pray for our nation. God is love. God bless.